Welcome back, cadavers, to Puppet Horror Top 10, where each week I give you new 10 mysteries to chew on. Yum, 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 yum. As we make our way down the list of 100 mysteries, I am Emilio.
Hi, Emilio.
Who are you? You're not Josh.
No, I'm Kelsey. Josh decided to sit this one out so I could host alongside you.
Wait, then whose hands up my ass?
So, Emilio, I believe last episode you started the 10 groups of 10 mysteries with the medical category.
Yes, that is correct, strange new lady. And with the 10 medical mysteries out of the way, that leaves us with 90 mysteries to go and puts us at the next mystery category and topic of this week's episode.
Great. Well, without further ado, let's jump into it and discuss 10 crazy mysteries involving
crimes.
Buckle up, cadavers. For this one, we travel all the way to Japan to look at the myriad of attacks that focused on food chains and a big candy company that admittedly makes some delicious treats, I must say. The attacks that I speak of have taken place in the 1980s, would range from threats to property damage to arson, kidnapping, and more, inevitably leading to millions of dollars lost, many lives ruined. This is the story of the monster with 21 faces. Izaki Calico may be best known for its pokey snacks, but in 1984, two armed men donning masks broke into the CEO's mother's home, where they bound her before stealing the key to Calico's CEO's home. The intruders would next use the stolen key to access the CEO's home. When entering his house, the men, like before, tied up those inside, which happened to be the CEO's wife and daughter. His wife attempted to negotiate money with the men, but they were after something more. It would later be discovered that the men, before entering residence, had taken precautions by cutting off the phone lines, so no outgoing calls could be made by anyone in the home, in case anyone else were hiding within the residence. This would prove to have been a smart move for the two intruders, as it just so happened, Izaki and his two other children were in fact home, hiding in the bathroom. But unable to make any emergency calls, and with nothing else to do but to sit quietly, it wasn't long until they were discovered. They abducted Izaki and held him hostage at an abandoned warehouse. They issued a ransom for 1 billion yen, which is roughly 9 million in US currency. I should remind you that this is in the early to mid 80s, so 9 million then would be equivalent to roughly 23 million today. On top of the billion yen ransom, they also requested 100 kilograms of gold bars. If my math is correct, it worked out to be just over $1 million. So, in total, the ransom was set for about 10 million US dollars. But in a shocking turn of events, their plans were foiled when Izaki somehow managed to escape 3 days after being taken hostage. A few weeks after that incident, vehicles parked at the company's headquarters were set on fire. Now, coinciding with the arson and kidnapping investigation, investigators, while processing the warehouse where Izaki was held prisoner, discovered a container containing hydrochloric acid, along with a letter addressed to Calico. This marked the start of a string of threats from the unknown entity that now dubbed itself the Monster with 21 Faces. The menacing name was based off of a villain in a Japanese detective series that was featured as the Fiend with 20 Faces. This connection would never lead investigators to those responsible. The wave of threats penned by the monster threatened the company's products, claiming that their candies were laced with potassium cyanide, which caused Calico to pull the products, resulting in a $21 million loss and layoffs. Hindsight, that $10 million ransom isn't looking so bad now, is it? But after months of tormenting Galico, the monster with 21 faces abruptly stopped torturing the candy company and sent their final letter to Galico, reading, "We forgive Galico." The many-faced monster then turned their sights to the food company, Marudai, and Fujiya. Much like with Galico, the entity known as the Monster with 21 Faces did request a ransom to be paid for the threats to stop. An exchange was put in place, and of course the police made sure to include a tail to try and catch those responsible. However, the man the police dubbed the Fox-Eyed Man got away. After this failed tale, the monster turned to harassing the law. And this is where the crimes result in a deadly outcome. Perhaps it was due to the pressure, embarrassment, or failure to solve the case that lead police superintendent Yamamoto decided to commit suicide by setting himself on fire. Holy shit! 5 days following the death, the monster with 21 faces sent its final letter to the media. The letter reads as follows. Yamamoto of Shiga Prefecture Police died. How stupid of him. We've got no friends or secret hiding place in Shiga. It's Yoshino or Shikata who should have died. What have they been doing for as long as 1 year and 5 months? Don't let bad guys like us get away with it. There are many more fools who want to copy us. No career Yamamoto died like a man. So, we decided to give our condolence. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies. If anyone blackmails any of the food-making companies, it is not us, but someone copying us. We are bad guys. That means we've got more to do than bullying companies. It's fun to lead a bad man's life. Signed, the monster with 21 faces. And with that final statement, the monster with 21 faces vanished, never to be seen or heard again. No one knows who was responsible, why they targeted whom they targeted, and why they stopped so suddenly, just to vanish entirely. One of the maybe more recognizable mysteries that I have compiled is the case of the Stockton Arsonist. It is a mystery you might be familiar with, but due to the chilling details and footage that was discovered, I felt like it had to be included. August 5th, 1989, a family driving near Stockton, California, pulled to the side of the road after their car overheated. The father and son decided to walk to the nearest payphone to call for help when, while walking, the two would stumble upon something strange. Seemingly in the middle of nowhere, the son spotted a camouflage jacket lying just off the road. Inspection revealed that the jacket had a single videotape inside its pocket. Curious to see what was on the tape, the father and son brought the tape home with them. It was played in the family VCR, and after viewing, they received a phone call that was letting them know that 7 days later, they would die.
That sounds like the plot to The Ring.
Let me check real quick. You're right, wrong script. The tape showed a building on fire along with a strange man's commentary. The man's voice was creepy to say the least. He filmed the burning structure as he spoke of Satan and an unidentified figure named Omar. Authorities were of course given the tape and the investigation began, though at first, linking the fire would prove difficult, as no fires were reported, nor matched the burning structure shown in the videotape, at least not any time recently. But that's because it would turn out that the fire took place over a year earlier. When authorities went back to the jacket, a matching glove was found nearby, as well as some items that authorities said were commonly found in cases of Satan worship. What? Did I say something?
Oh, nothing.
Anyway, the culprit was never found, and the crime would remain unsolved. In early 2021, a story began spreading on the internet about a Russian hairdresser named Ogre Zajac. If you've heard this one, then you know here goes any hope of monetizing this video. But I'll try and keep this one PG. The story goes that in 2014, in a small town located 150 miles north of Moscow, a hairdresser and salon owner, Olga, was in for a surprise when an intruder broke into her business. Luckily for Olga, she was able to overpower the burglar, who had intentions of stealing Olga's earnings. This was extra unfortunate for the intruder, but not why you'd assume. I mean, let's just say Olga had no plans of calling the police. The intruder, simply known as Victor, was beaten, tied to a radiator, and stripped of his clothing. He was then force-fed Viagra, and you can use your imagination what happened next. Olga would keep giving Victor that little blue pill for 3 days straight, while she had her way with him. Sweet Mother Russia! A sick payment for the inconvenience of breaking into her salon. After 72 hours of a long assault, Olga took pity on the thief and released him on the condition he not say a word. He of course broke that promise, and they both were later arrested. No one knows for sure if this story is just another internet story or if there's any validity to the claim. However, many Russian natives claim that this isn't a rare occurrence, and things like this happened often in Russia. So excuse me while I take a vacation to Russia. This next one should probably fall under the murder category, but we just don't know for certain what happened, so under crimes it goes. And to add to the mystery, it takes place in the very reclusive North Korea. In 2015, while on a school trip, American college student Otto Warmbier was captured on hotel surveillance, stealing a poster from the wall of the hotel to keep as a souvenir. Stupid, yes. Naive, definitely. Sadly, this seemingly harmless attempt to come home with a North Korean piece of propaganda would land the 22-year-old college student in a North Korean courtroom. See, Otto was intercepted just before the students and teacher boarded their flight home to the States. This last-minute arrest caught everyone on the trip off guard, and fearing their own detainment and no U.S. embassy present, the rest of those on the trip had no other option but to board and report what had happened to Otto once on U.S. soil. As stated previously, Otto did receive a trial, but let's just say it wasn't a fair one, huh? The footage of Otto pleading to the North Korean court is difficult to watch. Otto is seen sobbing, pleading for his life while putting the blame for his actions on the US government, stating that he was forced to steal the propaganda piece because the US government was so envious of how great North Korea is. Otto was obviously threatened and coerced into saying these things, and he was probably hoping or even told it would earn him a lesser charge or keep him alive at the very least. But sadly, neither would happen, as for starters, Otto was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. If you are wondering what North Korea deems as hard labor, well, we sadly have an idea, since Otto is not the only American to have been imprisoned and sentenced to North Korean labor camps. Though our intelligence comes from solid sources, I suppose what actually happens could be a mystery all on its own, since the accounts do vary from prisoner to prisoner. There have been some who say, aside from the initial arrest, they were treated relatively fairly, given a bed and toilet to use. However, I should also inform you that this particular claim came from someone who was also released under the request of President Bill Clinton. I don't care who you are. There's only one thing scarier than North Korea, and that's being Clintoned. So maybe that high-profile prisoner isn't a good example. Another probably more day-to-day experience told by a survivor was one who claimed you're forced to work 15 hours a day and given no clean clothing, no socks, or undergarments whatsoever. And for a meal, you are only fed corn and salt. I should also add that this guy didn't have the Clinton pool, so I'm guessing that's more normal treatment for those who are lucky. Now, let's jump back to Otto. Though he was sentenced to a total of 15 years hard labor, after 17 months in captivity, Otto was to finally be released back to his family. That is only after the Trump administration stepped in and persuaded North Korean officials to return the young man home. So, early 2017, Otto was returned home to his parents. Unfortunately, it was not in the state which he left. When Otto returned home, he did not step off the plane as his family had hoped. Otto had been wheeled off on a stretcher since he was in a coma, suffering from a severe neurological injury. North Korea would claim that Otto's condition was due to botulism on top of a sleeping pill that he supposedly took and denied any responsibility for his present state. However, the American coroner who would perform Otto's autopsy determined the cause of death to be caused by an unknown injury that caused a lack of oxygen to Otto's brain. Otto sadly died 6 days after he returned home. In 2019, Donald Trump cleared North Korea of any responsibility for Otto's death and took the country's word that he fell ill like North Korea had claimed he had. Otto's parents, of course, took issue with this finding, but unfortunately nothing can bring back their son. All they are left with is questions as to what really happened after Otto was sentenced and dragged away all over a piece of paper. This one isn't necessarily your typical mystery, as we know what happened, but the shocking and atrocious act is so egregious that it will leave you wondering how anyone could do such a thing. Thus, I decided to include it. This is another you may have heard of. I couldn't not talk about it, and that is the unusual love life of Dr. Carl Tanzler. The year was 1930 in Florida, because of course Florida, when Dr. Tanzler met and developed an unhealthy obsession for a young Cuban-American tuberculosis patient named Elena Helen Milagro de Hoyos. We will just refer to her as Helen. Dr. Tanzler tried his best to save his beloved Helen from her impending doom, but sadly she would eventually succumb to her disease. Though some would argue that some things like love are more powerful than death. So this would seem in Dr. Tanzler's case, because he was not so willing to live without his Helen. No, see, his love would triumph. Quick disclaimer, what I'm about to mention is not love, but freaking weird, okay? The doctor was said to visit Helen's grave nightly for 2 years straight, when one day he just stopped visiting. The family thought this odd, since the doctor couldn't spend one night without visiting the one he loved so much. Unbeknownst to Helen's grieving family, the doctor was not without his late crush at all. This is because he had removed her body from her tomb and lived with Helen's corpse for 7 years. It wasn't until he was caught red-handed by authorities who discovered Helen's lifeless body along with some cosmetic upgrades. I won't exactly go through them all, but for example, Tanzler used wax and plaster to create a new layer of skin. He placed glass eyes in her sockets and even inserted the tubing system below her waist for more discreet uses. Tanzler did not face criminal repercussions though, since the statute of limitations had long passed. But Helen was returned to her family and reburied to finally rest in peace. Years later, after Dr. Tanzler died, he was found in his home next to a life-size doll with a mask molded to look like Helen's. I guess the mystery here is, was Dr. Tanzler the first Florida man? Not all heists are carried out for money. Furthermore, not all heists are carried out by criminals having to leave their homes at all. The fear of having your public information stolen by hackers is an everyday worry, especially these days. But with modern security software, companies trained to discover vulnerabilities, many of us are able to comfortably go on with our day-to-day routine without having to panic every time we sign up for a new membership or purchase online. When we shop online or swipe our credit cards at a local Target, we trust that the company we choose to do business with is well protected, and often we assume so, but sadly, this isn't always the case. And no, this isn't about the 2013 Target hack. My mentioning them was simply a red herring. This hack is more lucrative. Many of you are probably familiar with the high-end dating escort service site known as Ashley Madison. Right. Moving on. It is a site that encourages men to have secret affairs with no strings attached. Well, in 2015, hackers were able to infiltrate the dating site's database, effectively gaining access to almost the entire list of clientele and members. This was big because many of the site's patrons were high-profile and ranking individuals with wives and families who were probably blithely playing Jenga at home, unaware of what Daddy was doing. But that didn't stop these hackers from going public with the names of those millions of users who subscribed to the dating site. The list of members exposed amounted to over 25 gigabytes worth of names, data, and detailed user information. This, of course, led to public backlash and shaming of those who had held memberships. Though it is a mystery as to who had carried out the hack and release of private information, there is an ironic twist that would follow the leak. I am speaking of the lawsuit against Ashley Madison, filed by those members affected by the hack. Those patrons are suing the dating site for a combined amount of $151 million. Now, I say it's ironic because the reason for their filing is, and I quote, damage to their home lives. Do you see the irony? Those poor, cheating pieces of shit. Keeping in tune with the previous crime mystery, I decided to discuss a theory too wild not to mention. This could probably go under the conspiracy group later down the list, but I felt it necessary to place this one under crime simply for the hypocritical, blasphemous, and immoral implications if true. Now, I don't claim to be an expert when it comes to Vatican law, but I'm pretty sure if a pope were to be discovered with the world's largest archive of pornographic material, well, I'm guessing they wouldn't be pope for much longer. But who knows? They've covered up more. Well, there is a rumor that the Vatican holds more seductive, explicit content than anywhere else in the world. I just wonder if there is a Girls Gone Wild Vatican edition. Or like a bang bus, Pope style. The bang bubble.
What the is wrong with you?
On a serious note, those who have been affiliated with the Vatican vehemently deny this claim, although the rumor does suggest the archive is held in a secret room, which grants limited access. In 1955, Alfred Hitchcock directed a film based on a jewel heist called To Catch a Thief. Coincidentally, many decades later, that same location used for filming was a target of a similar crime. August 1994, in Cannes, France, 3 gunmen carrying automatic rifles stepped into the jewelry store of the famous Carlton Hotel, which was the location Hitchcock had filmed the previously mentioned film. The gunmen fired off rounds to let those nearby know they were serious. The thieves made off with jewelry, precious stones, and were able to leave without police intervention. When authorities investigated the robbery, it was quickly determined that no bullet holes were left, meaning that the automatic rifles the 3 had brought to intimidate those present were armed with blanks. The 3 men were never caught, and the estimated total of the heist was around $50 million. The biggest diamond heist, however, happened in 2013, and it only took 30 seconds, and a single armed man stepped into the jewelry showcase hosted by Israel billionaire Lev Laviv, bearing only a pistol. He forced the unarmed guards to their knees, and the lone thief was able to flee the showcase with a whopping $139 million in diamonds. Despite a $1.3 million reward, the thief was never caught. The strangest thing about this 30-second heist is it also took place at the Hotel Carlton. The very same hotel 19 years prior had been robbed by 3 gunmen firing blanks. And the same hotel Hitchcock filmed To Catch a Thief. Do you think these heists were carried out by the same perpetrators? Or is the Hotel Carlton just an easy target? It seems like we may never know. Many of us true crime lovers are most likely well familiar with the Ohio Circleville letters. And even though the writer of those letters was never caught, I would like to bring up a similar case involving threatening letters that started around 1910 and took place mainly in Chicago. Though I should mention that some of these threatening letters found their way to families all the way down in Louisiana. These frightening letters that I speak of were mostly mailed to affluent Italian families and families with Syrian ancestors. They were penned in thick black ink along with crude sketches of knives, smoking guns, and nooses. The letters always requested the same amount of ransom of $250, threatening bodily harm, kidnapping, and arson if not paid. The party responsible for the letters would leave instructions on where to leave the cash and always signed off with the same eerie pseudonym, the Black Hand. Most of the threats were ignored, and for a while those who ignored but reported the threats never had any trouble aside from maybe stress. This would lead authorities and newspapers to believe that the threats were half-hearted at best, and created by someone who just wanted to have some distasteful fun, with no real intention of making good on the threats. However, this would soon turn out to be a foolish belief. It all changed when the Black Hand started sending letters to R. Hester, the proprietor of a general merchandise store of Milton. Hester, like many before, reported the letters to authorities. Then, several days later, a second letter came, demanding that the money be hand-delivered to the extortionist at a specified location or else his store would burn to the ground. This raised eyebrows, but still Hester simply notified the police and ignored the threat. September 3rd, 1910. Hester received his third and final notice from the Black Hand, and this time the letter was sitting on his doorstep, hand-delivered by the extortionist. Hester, like before, reported the threat to the authorities, but they were confident that these were just shallow threats. Unfortunately for Hester, on September 10th, 1910, his business was indeed burned to the ground. The Black Hand was never caught, and by the 1920s, was never seen or heard from again. I do have a theory, though. Hester, the proprietor of the general merchandise store of Milton,
took a stapler off my desk.
right? Milton.
I believe you have my stapler.
Milton.
Okay, but I could set the building on fire.
Milton.
And it was burned to the ground? Tell me, did this merchandise store sell staplers? That's an Office Space reference. 1837 to 1901 was considered the Victorian era, and it was a glorious time of mercury, lead, disease, and smog. It was just a great time to be alive. But among all that fun stuff, lurking in the shadows was a cloaked figure just waiting to pounce on women in the night. And this phantom went by the name of Jack. Springheeled Jack, to be exact. I bet you thought I was talking about the Ripper. No, Jack the Ripper overshadowed Springheeled Jack, but the Ripper took place in the late 1880s. Springheeled Jack is the OG, and his appearance was monstrous. 1837, a woman walking back home through the area of Blackheath was in for a shock when a dark figure sprung from the shadows, breathing fire and smelling of hell. He tore at the woman's clothes, and then, as soon as he came, he went. Now, the woman was not gutted, not like Jack the Ripper, but she was scratched up and her clothes were all torn by what she accounts as metal claws for hands. The devil-like figure ran into the night, laughing as the woman lay terrified and torn. Unbeknownst to her, she would not be the only victim that night. In the park, not far away, another woman claimed to have been assaulted provocatively by a demon breathing blue flame that seemingly sprung up out of nowhere. After she screamed and drew attention, the devil disappeared into the night once again.
Hey, Emilio, how long would you say you've been around?
Very long time.
You ever visited London, say in the 1800s?
You know, that was a time, it was a bit of a blur. I was in college, things got weird. Don't really remember much, why do you ask?
Oh, no reason.
Right, well anyway, this swift demon of the night would soon get its name while crossing the cobblestone street, nearly avoiding a horse-drawn carriage. The horses were so startled by the devil's appearance that they would topple over, bringing the carriage down with them. The coachman was so angry that he chased after the cloaked, metal-clawed demon, but just when he thought he had him cornered, the demon jumped over a brick wall in a single leap, clearing the 9-foot wall with ease. And so he would forever be known as Springheeled Jack.
I'm not buying it.
What's not to buy?
Sounds a little convenient. This man who ran away from each assault laughing only decided to use his superhuman vaulting skills around a coach driver who was probably too old and beer-bellied to catch a guy who simply climbed a wall.
Well, the horses saw it too.
Something tells me we won't be hearing that from the horse's mouth.
That was a good one. Wait, why are you being so negative? Why can't you believe that this cloaked figure could leap over walls?
'Cause dude just sounds like a creep who just happens to be good at parkour.
That wasn't invented yet.
Neither were springed boots that made you jump abnormally high.
I don't like you.
I'm sorry, you're right. Go on with how you dressed like a vampire and did weird shit around town.
What? It wasn't me.
Okay, whatever you say, Shaggy.
So another woman was attacked at her home when she heard a knock at the door. When she answered the call, she was met by a man claiming to have spotted Springheeled Jack outside her home, but needed a light to see. The young aristocratic lady retrieved the candle only to notice the figure's red eyes, metal claws, and blue flame coming out of the mouth. When she approached, the demon pulled her out onto the porch while scratching her and pulling out her hair. The creature was only sent packing when the girl's father came rushing to the scene. But alas, Springheeled Jack was just too quickly fleeing the scene with perfectly working legs that didn't just dangle like a pair of noodles. This attack on the upper-class lady finally made officials take the case more seriously. But it wouldn't stop the demon called Jack. In an alleyway, two women would later be walking when they would be approached by a bobby with a lantern. Once close enough to the officer, Jack sprung into action, dropping his disguise and shooting his signature blue flame into the face of one of the women, who immediately had a seizure. Jack fled, satisfied of what he had induced, and was silent for some time. Reports came and went, sightings all over. Many claimed to have seen the demon-inspired menace jumping from the rooftops, spotting his silhouette in the moonlight. The attacks and sightings dwindled from there, but no one did discover who attacked those women. And like it or not, those women were indeed attacked. And before you say, yeah, but not by a blue flame-breathing demon, well, remember when I said that the demon smelled like hell? That's because of the sulfur that permeated off of the Springheeled demon. And what color does sulfur burn, kids? Say it with me. Blue! That's right! Though the solution to his blue flame may have been realized, unfortunately the identity of Springheeled Jack was never discovered. And with that, kids, we come to a close. We will pick up with the remaining 80 mysteries next week. Please, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let us know what your favorite mystery was down in the comments. If you wish to be notified of future mysteries, please make sure your notification bell is clicked. And you allow YouTube notifications within your device settings. Like always, there is a rubber ducky hidden within the episode. I'll pin the comment of whoever finds and timestamps its location to the top of the comment section. I'd also like to thank our special guest, Kelsey.
Thanks for having me, Emilio. It was interesting for sure.
What was your favorite mystery, would you say?
It's a toss-up between the Russian intruder, force-fed Viagra, and the weird doctor keeping a corpse for 7 years.
Wow. You got some weird shit going up there, don't ya?